evening. Hello and welcome to India Development Debate. I'm Nayantara Rai.
And I'm Ruchi Bhatia. Straight up, let's take it across to the top debate that we're tracking here then. The fault lines in India's telecom sector are only deepening, with cutthroat competition unleashed by Reliance Jio taking a toll on their bottom line. The likes of Vodafone-Idea and Bharti Airtel are gasping for breath. Add to that the high government levies like license fees and spectrum charges. Telecom companies are now staring at huge losses. In fact, in a recent meeting with the Telecom Ministry officials, Vodafone-Idea Chairman Kumar Mangalam Birla has even flagged off the acute liquidity crunch plaguing the telecom sector and has sought for a relief package.
And telecom troubles indeed bad news for the government as well, with a huge shortfall in shared revenues threatening to send the fiscal math out of whack. The contribution of the telecom sector plunged 37% in the last 2 years. This even as the massive debt pile of almost 8 lakh crore rupees is proving to be a big worry for banks, saving the Indian telecom industry from an impending collapse. That's what we're going to be discussing tonight on India Development Debate. And at this juncture, let me invite my panelists today, R. Chandrasekhar, the former Telecom Secretary and the former President of NASSCOM, till very recently also a board member with Yes Bank, Rajan Matthews, the Director General of the COAI, Sanjay Kapoor, the former CEO at Bharti Airtel, and the former Chairman, Micromax, and of course we got Jaideep Ghosh, the partner at KPMG. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight on India Development Debate. Mr. Chandrasekhar, I'm going to come to you first. Once again, so much noise around a government bailout. My question to you is, why should it be the centre, the government and us, the taxpayers, that bail out businesses that are failing because of incorrect business plans? That's the case in telecom. We're also discussing it in another industry, which is aviation, with respect to airlines. Why is it that the telecom czars are even expecting a bailout? There was so much noise about this very issue last year. We saw a high-level committee being set up by the Prime Minister's office, yet hardly any intervention in policies. What has changed in the last 1 year?
Well, I think that the telecom sector is going through some challenging periods, especially some of the players, I would say, more the legacy players. And I agree with you that there really isn't a very strong case for the government to bail out businesses which are not doing well for whatever reason or on account of business decisions that they have taken. But at the same time, this is one of the largest consumer services in the country, where almost 1 billion subscribers are served by the industry. And therefore, if there are challenges about the viability of the sector or the financial health of the sector, it is something that the government needs to take note of. So if there are these challenges, and if bailout is not one of the options on the table, what is it that the government can do? And I think that the other angle to this is that consumers are a very important set of stakeholders, aside from the government and the service providers, as well as the lenders, who are all very much a part of the financial equation. And in the interest of the consumers, it's also important that there needs to be a certain minimum level of competition. I think unless you have at least 2 or 3 players who are quite active, investing and providing services, consumer interest in the long run cannot be protected. And therefore, it becomes important to ensure that there is a reasonable level of viability across the sector and not just a particular player in the sector. So I think from all of these points of view, the question which arises, the moot point, is whether there is a case for some kind of relief by the government. Some of it was given in the form of staggered payments for spectrum, and the obvious reliefs that are possible are moderation of the rate of revenue share, which is quite significant, moderation of the spectrum charge, although there are a number of issues which arise in that context, which I am sure will come up for discussion as we go forward. But these are the 2 essential paths available to, in a sense, moderate the impact on the sector, but not definitely a bailout, which is something which I don't think it's possible or even feasible or desirable maybe for the government to do.
Right, Mr. Chandrasekhar, we will talk about, the viability angle that you were talking about, and of course, the nature of the relief that the telecom players are seeking. But let me take it across to Raj and Matthew. For the longest time, all telecom companies have blamed Reliance Jio in the past, and you've described it as predatory pricing. But when will the incumbents really take responsibility of not investing in infrastructure, of not investing in network, not investing enough in data as well? We've been depending for way too long on the interconnect charges. In fact, even today's report of Kotak says that 30% of Bharti's and Vodafone's EBITDA alone is from interconnect charges, and this is going to fall to zero in 2020. What have the incumbents been relying on, Mr. Matthews?
So first of all, I think we need to put the contours of the industry in correct form. And I think Mr. Chandrasekhar has pointed out a bailout. We are not asking for a bailout. We're asking for the government to address the structural issues as a result of some flawed policy arrangements. And one of them is the fact that in addition to getting your upfront payments for spectrum, when we went to an auction process, you continued the legacy process of revenue share. So we become one of the heaviest taxed industries short of the sin industries. So over 30% of every top line revenue number goes back to the government. So all we are asking for is for the government to stop the double taxation, if you will, of taking money upfront for spectrum, loading the industry with debt, and then continuing the revenue share. Stop the revenue share, which is the license fee, spectrum usage charge, give that liquidity back to the industry, and allow the industry to continue to invest in the infrastructure that is necessary to take the country forward and provide the needed services for the citizens. That is what the contours of the industry look like and what we are asking for from the government.
Okay, I take your point, Mr. Matthews. I'm going to go across next to Mr. Sanjay Kapoor. You've heard what Rajiv Chandrasekhar, RC has to say. You've heard what Rajan Matthews had to say. Now, it's against this very backdrop and against these very existing parameters that you saw the Vodafone-Idea deal take place, one of the largest deals in the Indian M&A landscape. Kumar Mangalam Birla, known to have a Midas touch, but has he made a bad decision here? He knew about the taxation, he knew about the revenue share, he knew exactly how much has to be shared with the government or not have to be shared with the government. And look at all the brokerage reports that have been coming out in the last 48 to 72 hours. Jeffries, for example, says the $3.5 billion fund raised by Vodafone-Idea is not going to be enough. I repeat for my viewers, $3.5 billion is not going to be enough. Vodafone-Idea knew exactly what they were walking into when they announced that transaction, when they consummated the transaction. Today, Kumar Mangalam Birla being seen at Sanchar Bhavan, in conversation with the Telecom Secretary Aruna Sundarajan. We've read the reports about how the incumbents led by Kumar Mangalam Birla are seeking policy intervention. So once again, why should the government have to bail out Vodafone-Idea or lead a helping hand? Or why should the taxpayer also fund it for an expensive acquisition?
Right, Nayantara. So there is a big issue, and it's a structural issue. It's a structural issue from two perspectives. It's a structural issue from the perspective of a fallacious business model that's operating in this country. And there's also some merit in what Rajan and Mr. Chandrasekhar spoke about, and I'll touch base on both these. You see, when we were running these businesses at the back of only voice and SMS revenues, we used to make 40-50% EBITDA in this market, and therefore there was enough cash to invest back into this business. But over time, that entire cash has really gone into the blue skies. Nothing's available. Today, the situation is that with technology now not lasting 10 years, but lasting 5 years, transformations happening on technology and investments required on customer experience on data versus voice and SMS earlier is a lot higher. But there are no monies left with anybody, right? And this is a situation that India has led itself into, where I think the future of the customer's experience and the industry per se to migrate from 4G to 5G and first of all get 4G right has become a big question mark, right? I think so there's a big design failure on the way the businesses are operating in this country. The issue is, do we have the right pricing? I still continue to say that for the sustainability of this industry, this whole pricing structure is not sustainable. This is not sustainable. The world over, when you look at what is happening in the telecom markets, more and more markets you will see where only one operator is making money, the second operator is just on the bench, and the third operator is in the red. There are very few markets in which the fourth player really has any existence of any nature. India is boiled down to a three-player scenario, and I think it is very evident that right now it's only the challenger who's probably got from behind and put a challenge by way of a whole new technological shift that he's made in the market and a whole new design shift that he's made both on his costing structures and on his pricing structures, and has put a checkmate for everybody else. Now just support this with the government policies. Of course, you know, in a market where there are market discovered prices for spectrum, generally in any part of the world, there's no higher taxation on revenue share or administrative charges. So that is a case that is not new. That is something that the telecom operators have been debating and requesting the government for many years. Even during my tenure, you know, this was a debate and no decision has been taken. So I think in these circumstances, the policy of the government has to be sustainable, which sustains the industry over a large period in time. So I think it's a both ways.
Absolutely. You know, we have to look at a sustainable pricing formula as well as the government intervention that's also needed. But let me get Jaideep Ghosh into this discussion. Jaideep, you know, we have seen Jio coming up with huge disruptions in the market and reporting fourth straight profitable quarter. Will capital expenditure, equity infusions and a government package for other telecom companies increase competitive intensity and will help in sustaining this trend for over next 1 year? At the India Mobile Congress, for example, while Sunil Bharti Mittal and Kumar Mangalam Birla were talking about government needing to rationalize duties on one hand, Mukesh Ambani on the same stage had a completely different idea of things. He was showing the world videos of driverless cars, talking about Jio Giga Fiber. I mean, how does this really work?
Okay, so let me, first kind of give very quickly the contours, from a kind of time frame where we had seen, 8, 10, 12 telecom operators. Now we are at least in a situation which we have been talking for a long time, is that we have, 4 telecom operators and 3 of the private operators hold about 90% of the revenue market share and more than 80% of the spectrum. So that's what is what we have been speaking for several years actually, that's what kind of is ideal structure, with the relevant checks and balances and the competitive intensity, is assured for customer and the consumer benefits. Now coming to your question, see, if I take the 3 private sector operator groups, they are coming from different backgrounds and the contexts are different. There is one, say Bharti Airtel, who has been operating in this market for roughly say 2 decades, roughly give or take. There is Reliance Jio, who is again operating for 2 years. And Vodafone-Idea in the merged entity format, if I look at the formal announcement and the the regulatory approvals, that's kind of 2 months. So the context is somebody is for 2 decades plus, somebody is for kind of 2 years, and the third merged entity, while they've been operating individually for long, is like a 2 months. So the priorities are different, the contexts are different, investment appetite, etc. are different. That's why this is happening. As you said in the Indian Mobile Congress, where in fact KPMG was the knowledge partner, while the incumbents, the more older operators were speaking about the industry should get relief and the debt and the spectrum charges and levies, etc. The newer operator, the disruptor, the challenger is speaking more about driverless cars, 5G, Giga Fiber, etc. Because the perspectives are different. That's why this is happening. In terms of but while the perspectives are different, the contexts are different, and various other things, strategic elements may be different. Finally, they're serving the same customer base, whether it is retail mobile, whether it is home broadband, whether it is, enterprise. So that's where I think, these differences are coming in terms of somebody seeing it as a stress situation, somebody looking this as opportunity.
Yeah, we know who's looking at it as an opportunity and who is getting stressed on the entire situation, Joydeep. And I'm going to take that next question across to Mr. Chandrasekhar now. Driverless cars, gigafibers, broadband being the next big bet, data being called the new oil. Mr. Chandrasekhar, you know, I want to ask you a different question, and that is, will the incumbents exhaust themselves completely trying to play catch up with Relgio? How scary is that situation? We are already down to 3 telecom players. Whether that's good news for the consumers or not, only time is going to tell us that. But can we rule that out, that we could perhaps see more consolidation even though there are just 3 telecom companies? Or is that precisely why the government needs to maybe intervene?
Well, you know, in today's digital world, innovation is a constant, and that innovation in turn leads to disruption. And what we are seeing in the technology sector is the impact of that disruption. We are seeing it in many other sectors. You know, look at what, for example, Uber and Ola have done to the taxi business, or look at what, you know, Oyo has done to the hotel industry, and so on. So here, you know, the new entrant has the advantage of not just adopting the latest technology, but also bringing in an element of disruption by clubbing many things, many services with the telecom services, and thereby bringing a whole new business model to the table, apart from the fact that they are bringing new technology which enables new services at radically different price points. I don't think that it's the government's business to get into ensuring survival of companies which have been disrupted, howsoever you know, problematic that might be from a company perspective. The only reason for the government to look at this is to ensure that there is at least a minimum level of competition in the sector, because the issue is not whether there is further consolidation or not. The issue is that the legacy players have certain challenges, and those challenges are not going to go away easily because they have invested in a very different era. The other thing is that as far as the existing players are concerned, they have bought spectrum through an auction process. In the auction, not only was the reserve price fixed, but the entire set of terms and conditions, including what would be the arrangements for revenue share, were a part of that process. So there will be an argument undoubtedly, if any changes are made to this, that you know, a price which was settled through an auction is being retrospectively adjusted, and that's certainly a problematic situation from a public perception point of view, or from public management of, you know, the public funds. So I think that's the question, and unless there is clear evidence, which is certainly not there at the moment, that the the challenger is adopting predatory prices. That doesn't seem to be the case, because profitability also has been demonstrated by some of the numbers which are coming out from there as well.
That's a very valid point, Mr. Chandrasekhar, but let me take it across to Sanjay Kapoor. Sanjay, do you believe that, you know, there's not any choice that is left with the incumbents to just now comply with what Reliance Jio is already doing? And what really are the big lessons in this entire episode for both the government as well as the industry? What is it that they can learn from this, you know, the battles that have played out in the market?
Yeah, sure. I think you're asking a very moot question, and you know, let me upfront say that hypothetically, let's assume that tomorrow government agrees to give some respite to all the operators on revenue share, etc., etc. Even if that was to happen, I promise you that money is not enough to bail the incumbent operators out. There is a bigger issue, that there is a transformation of technology that has happened. And the problem that everybody faces is that the thought leadership of the market and the industry has passed on to the challenger in the marketplace. So he's virtually deciding which technology, what pricing plan, which vendors. So he set a whole new ecosystem going in the marketplace that the incumbents are unable to do because they are stuck with legacy revenues and legacy customers into 3 different technologies. There are some very hard calls to be taken in this country to say, am I going to deploy my 900 valuable spectrum to service 2G customers and 3G customers when 3G technology is completely defunct the world over? The world has moved to 4G and is finally going to move to 5G and further on, right? They have to take those calls. They are still stuck with 2G and 3G because they have millions of customers who probably at the lowest end of the market, giving them 20 rupees, 30 rupees a month, are still on those networks. So I think there are some very hard calls to be taken. And then how do you bring up the customer experience, because the cash flows are dwindling in
2G, 3G
those
doesn't
companies.
always work the best, Sanjay. We do struggle with call drops. A lot of us are just working our phones on Wi-Fi. Call drops, very much a reality that we're living in. Once again, maybe because we didn't see enough being invested in infrastructure, network. Same time, those studies around towers, you've had to pull the towers down as well. So Rajan, Matthew, enough of what has been done. I want to talk to you about the future. We are heading into the era of 5G. The Modi government says it's not going to be caught napping on 5G. It wants to be one of the first few countries to roll that out. The big question is, how are the 2 incumbents going to pay for the 5G spectrum? And aren't their hands tied? Because we do know that the disruptor is going to be buying that spectrum. So how is this exactly going to pan out? If the government is watching you right now, what would your advice be? We also know from the Supreme Court's verdict, it has to be an auction process. Maximization of revenue has to be a policy.
So Nayanthara, first of all, a correction. The Supreme Court never said that while you auction it, maximization of revenue has got to be the criteria. In fact, if you look at the national data policy that has just come out, you'll notice that the government has precisely changed that, saying revenue optimization, not revenue maximization, is the policy prescription of the government going forward. But that being said, let's get to the 5G issue. Most of the operators have said that, listen, 5G is at least 2 years plus away in terms of the applications and the use cases. And yes, I think in that time frame, what is necessary is to get liquidity back into the hands of the operators. As you said, competition is important, it's necessary. And so if we look at the short term, we are well positioned to take the benefit of the long term, which is to start transitioning to the newer technologies and provide the customers of this country with the newer technologies that are coming online. Just a point of correction to Mr. Chandrasekhar. He talked about government subsidies. All of us taxpayers subsidize BSNL, MTNL, Air India, other PSUs. So this is not new. Secondly, let me refer to the Honorable late Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, who basically took a historic decision in similar type of circumstances with similar type of arguments. He said, okay, fine, you guys have made commitments, you've made a bid, yes, you knew the market conditions, but you're in a fix. And he took a historic, courageous decision to go to revenue share, and the rest, as they say, is history until now. I think we need some courageous decisions in terms of fixing the problem, get liquidity into the industry, and we'll be poised to take the industry forward. This is a temporary blip, and I think we can fix it if the government and industry work together, and we can go forward in the interest of the customer.
Temporary blip, nothing much to worry about, is what Rajan Matthew is saying, provided the industry and the government do work together. With that, we're completely running out of time, so I'm going to thank all my panelists for taking the time out and joining us this Thursday evening on India Development Debate.